Hey, I'm Audra Yankton, empowerment coach and researcher, and this is Unveil You, the podcast where spirituality meets practicality to help you step fully into your power. Each week, we'll talk about what it really means to align with your higher self, trust your inner knowing, and walk through life with grounded, soul-led confidence. Let's get into it. Welcome back, beautiful soul. And today we are going to talk about something that I believe to be a huge tool in self-improvement that I have personally used a lot on myself. And I'm talking about a thing called positive affirmations. So have you ever stared into the mirror and repeated something like, I am worthy, and felt absolutely nothing? Maybe even worse than nothing. Maybe you felt like a fraud. And then the shame sets in. And it's not because affirmations don't work. It's because you probably skipped the step your brain actually needs to believe it. So, in today's episode, I'm going to talk you through the science of affirmations, how to identify what talk tracks in your mind may be holding you back, how to then change those tracks into powerful affirmations that serve you in your growth journey. And then finally, I will walk you through a real life example of my biggest affirmation and how I used all of these techniques to create it. So, what is an affirmation and why would you use one? To define it officially, an affirmation is a clear and powerful statement used to consciously rewire your subconscious beliefs. So they're meant to align your thoughts, feelings, and energy with the version of you that you're becoming or the version of you that you want to become. Think of it like a mental rehearsal. You're speaking into existence the reality you want to live and training your brain to believe that it's actually possible. But affirmations only work when your brain sees them as emotionally plausible. So most people try positive affirmations hoping for a quick change, but end up feeling frustrated or stuck because their brain just doesn't buy it. When affirmations don't resonate deeply, they're just like whispering into the wind, like no real shift is going to happen. You know the difference between just saying something just to say it and those times where you could feel the truth in your core? We're talking about how to get that feeling for anything you want to achieve and then write it into existence. But when you understand how to create affirmations that your brain believes and accepts, you unlock the power to rewire your thinking, release limiting beliefs, and step fully into the person you're meant to be. This isn't just about feel good talk, it's neuroscience in action, and it can actually change your life. That's why mastering affirmations is absolutely worth your time. Like, if there's one thing you're going to put all of your time into, I would suggest it's this. Because the way you talk to yourself shapes your reality. And when you get that right, everything starts to change. So today's episode is about how to create affirmations that your brain actually accepts and how that can change everything. So, for those of you that know me, I am a scientist and I really, really don't believe stuff unless it really makes sense to me at a scientific level. So, I went ahead and broke down the science behind why this works for those of you that might also be interested in that and won't just take my word just because I said so. So, let's talk about what's happening in your brain when you say an affirmation and why most of them aren't landing. So, first things first, we have this thing called the Reticular Activating System, or the RAS. And this is the part of your brain that acts like a bouncer at a club, for example. It filters information based on what you already believe. So, in an effort to kind of reduce the mental burden of sifting through stuff yourself, it only lets through stuff that it deems actually important. So, if your affirmation doesn't match your identity, your RAS is going to go ahead and dismiss it. And it doesn't do this out of an act of sabotage, it's just an act of self protection. And then when your affirmations contradict deeply held beliefs, your brain flags this contradiction. So instead of accepting the new idea, it often doubles down on the old one. And this is going to create some emotional friction. And it can actually strengthen your limiting belief, which obviously is not something you want. So it's important to understand this part again to create a really good positive affirmation that your brain is going to actually buy into. So then getting deeper on the science, I want to talk about something called neuroplasticity. So I went and looked up the actual dictionary definition, which is the ability of the brain to form and reorganize synaptic connections, especially in response to learning something or experiencing something or following an injury. So then broken down in plain English, neuroplasticity means that your brain can change. It rewires itself based on new experiences and repeated patterns. But repetition alone doesn't do the trick. You can't just sit in front of the mirror and say to yourself, I am worthy. I am worthy. I am worthy until you're blue in the face. It just doesn't work. You actually need to have this, what we'll call winning combination, which is emotion plus repetition plus safety. So when you say an affirmation that feels emotionally believable, even if it's just 1%, your brain begins laying down those new neural pathways. Even that 1% believability, your RAS system isn't going to just kick it to the side and deem it as false. It says, oh, okay, this is somewhat true. And then we'll allow that back into your brain. And then these new neural pathways start to develop to support this new belief that you were trying to instill in your brain. So these new paths grow stronger the more you return to them, and they literally can reshape your internal landscape. So it's really, really cool what our brains do, even when we're not asking them to do anything, right? So then the final piece of this, of the science part, is going to be mirror neurons and the visualization that works with that. So what is a mirror neuron? A mirror neuron is the brain cells that fire both when you perform an action and then when you observe someone else performing it. They work equally just as well. So, again, that's when you go and perform an action or when you witness someone else performing it. So, you don't actually have to do it for these neurons to work. They're a core reason why watching someone else succeed can be motivating, or why also, unfortunately, witnessing fear can be contagious. Your brain doesn't always distinguish between what's real and what's imagined. So when you visualize your affirmation and feel the emotional truth of it, your mirror neurons help encode that imagined experience as a lived one. So again, you don't even have to actually experience something when you visualize something effectively. Your brain acts as though it's experiencing that, even though you aren't doing it yourself. So that's really cool. And this is mental rehearsal in action. You're training your brain and body to believe that it's already happening. So, for example, when you want to affirm something like, I lead with confidence, and you picture yourself walking boldly into a meeting, your brain is practicing that experience as if it's real. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Mirror neurons also respond to imagined identity shifts. So when you visualize the version of you who already embodies your affirmation, your brain begins reinforcing those traits. And the more vividly you imagine, and not just the action, but the emotional state, the environment, the outcome, the stronger the effect. So I'm talking things like you're trying to imagine yourself being more confident and walking into that conference room and just this unshakable confidence. Try to actually get into the feeling of like, what does that feel like to be so bold? Or what are like even the sights and the smells that come with that? The more senses you can like bring into these visualizations, the more effective these are going to be. So this deepens the neural encoding and it builds a belief at the subconscious level. So that's the science of why this can all work physiologically. But now we need to talk about these things called limiting beliefs that are actually controlling your life subconsciously, whether or not you want them to. So, what is a limiting belief? Limiting beliefs are the internal scripts that are holding you back. They're usually unconscious and they feel like facts, but just because they feel like facts doesn't mean that they are. For example, do you know someone that is super smart? And when you tell them that obvious fact and say, you are so smart, they say, no, I'm not. I don't know anything. That's because, regardless of the reality, they hold what we're calling a limiting belief of not being smart, and that keeps them held back. So, where do these come from? Most are formed in childhood, and they're shaped by trauma, repetition, or environment. I'm sure if you think of some places that you don't have as much confidence in, you can almost always tie that back to some kind of childhood memory, some kind of trauma that happened to you, maybe an environment you grew up in. We aren't born automatically thinking negative things about ourselves. It's a learned behavior. So therefore it can be unlearned too, right? So some common examples of some limiting beliefs that I've heard before or that I'm sure we can all relate to are I'm not good enough, or people won't take me seriously. Or for me personally, being visible is dangerous. That's one I grew up believing for a long time. Another one might be I always mess things up. So, how do you actually identify a limiting belief? It's not like we're consciously thinking these things all the time. And it's really hard sometimes to know what is a limiting belief and where does that come from. So, some of us might know right away like 5 to 10 limiting beliefs that they have, which is a great place to start. But for others who feel stuck, like they know they have negative self-talk issues, but no idea where they stem from, here are some things you can do and pay attention to start to unpack these. So I like to start by tracking my emotional responses. So, in times where you're feeling not so good about yourself, if you can actually stop yourself and turn inward and start to sort through, where do you feel stuck or small or ashamed or anxious? Or perhaps even what situations trigger a disproportionate emotional reaction? Like, does public speaking in front of 20 people make you just absolutely so anxious you can't even stomach the thought of it? That feels a little bit disproportionate to the actual thing that's going on, which is speaking in front of 20 people, right? So, where does that come from? Think of the triggers like that. Another question you can ask yourself when you're trying to understand these emotional responses are, when do you shrink or self sabotage or even avoid taking action? These moments are clues that a limiting belief may be running the show for you. And it's also important not to judge yourself for anything as you uncover the truth about it and the root causes. Judgment's what got you there in the first place, so don't do it to yourself now in a conscious way. You are doing big work here, and you should not judge yourself for anything. And again, awareness brings change, so thank yourself for learning more about the why so that you can begin to address it. And once you start to identify those limiting beliefs and scripts that are running in the background, start to ask yourself, when did I first start thinking this way? And again, just don't judge yourself for any thought that comes to mind. If it's something that happened in your teen years, if it's something that happened when you were a small child, if it's something that happened maybe even when you were a baby and you can't even believe that you can remember stuff like that. Just try to understand, when did I first start thinking this way? Another thing to that is going to be really helpful to understand is, whose belief are you actually carrying? Like, is it your belief or is it someone else's? Is it maybe like an old relationship or perhaps a parent or a different family member, maybe a friend? Is it their belief about you that's actually spilling over into your beliefs about yourself? That's super important to identify. And then finally, ask yourself, what are you afraid of happening if you've stopped believing in that? And as you can tell, this can take a lot of inner work to become aware of these beliefs. But by surfacing these buried thoughts, you're going to bring them into light. And what you can see, you can shift. So that's what's important here. So now that you've identified your limiting belief, the next part of this is how to get your brain to believe what you want, to shift it into believing. Like, how are you going to prove to yourself that this new way of thinking is true so that your brain can rewire to support the shift? This is about becoming your own inner advocate, your own personal cheerleader. You can ask yourself things like, has this belief ever been wrong? If the answer is yes, then there you go. You've already disproved it. You're imagining things into reality when sometimes they don't even become reality. Another thing to ask yourself is, what would I say to someone I love who believed this? We're often the hardest on ourselves, so switching the perspective to someone that you love can help you look through the lens of fairness and compassion, which a lot of us do not hold for ourselves in the same way, which is super unfortunate because the saying is true. If you don't love yourself, you really can't love others. So it's super, super important to cultivate this self love within yourself, or else you really can't change anything. So again, that's a really big one. And actually, something that I had a client who this really resounded with one time was, if you can't do it for yourself, can you do it for the child version of yourself or a friendship or someone else? So, again, what would I say to someone I love who believed this? The next thing you can ask yourself is, who benefits from me keeping this belief? If the answer is nobody, then what reason is there to hold on? And even if it's someone else that benefits by you keeping that belief, again, if it's not you, is it really that important? Really, what you believe about yourself is the only thing that matters. And then finally, a really big one is, what is the cost of continuing to believe this? Like, if you're trying to go and start a new business, but you have in your head that success is not possible for you, that's a pretty big cost, right? Like, you cannot have a thriving, good business if you don't believe it will be successful. So, if you can really understand the cost of continuing to believe these, negative beliefs about yourself, then you have a lot of motivation to change that. So then here's how to disprove your limiting belief if none of that got you into an automatic disproving. So first things first, you can go ahead and gather counter evidence from your own personal past. So this is looking for small wins and real moments that contradict that belief. Like, for example, if you believe that you are no good at something like cooking, yet every time you go to a gathering, people ask you to bring your famous XYZ dish, then you can't be that bad at cooking, right? So that's gathering the counter evidence from your own past. Another thing that I like to do is seek out role models or mentors that prove whatever belief you hold false by how they live. So, this can be someone that you actually know or something as simple as someone you follow online, even if you've never met them. See them living in a way that you feel is impossible for you. If someone else is doing it, then you can too. End of story. No one is more special than the other. If someone else is doing something with their human body, you can absolutely do that too. There is no question about that. Another thing to look into is you can break the belief into different parts and say, is every part of this always true? Because usually it's not. You could also use logic and compassion, which, even if this was true once, is it true now for you? Things can change. People change all the time. So maybe something did happen to you one time, but is that still the truth of what it is for you now? And then finally, you can use your own language, which is speaking directly to the belief like you're gently coaching a younger version of you. Again, just all the compassion and love you have coaching this person within you. This is key in writing an affirmation that is effective too. So that's going to be really helpful to help you disprove this negative belief that you hold about yourself as well. So then when you disprove the belief, you're not just rejecting it, you're actually replacing it with something more grounded and empowered and real. So then let your nervous system register this shift. This isn't just about mindset, it's about energetic safety and self trust. So now that you have identified your limiting belief or beliefs and now have logic to disprove them, now it's time to write the affirmations. I like to start with this framework, which starts with present tense only. So we're not wishing things to happen in the future and we're not talking about them in the past. We're talking about the present as though time doesn't exist. So use phrases like I am, or I show up as, or I lead with. We're talking about who you already are as what you want to install into your brain. So, present tense as though it is already happening is the key here. Your affirmation also has to be emotionally believable, even if it's just 1%. Because remember, we have that RAS in our brain that is kicking aside the things that are not believable. So, you have to give it that one, at least 1% believability. And then all of a sudden, your brain can sort of start to buy into that. And then also, this needs to be super specific and embodied because vague things don't stick. So, for example, instead of just saying, I want to be confident, notice how, like, you're saying, I want to be, that's like not present tense. That's just aspirational at that point. Just saying, I want to be confident. It's also super vague. So, you can actually rewrite that into something like, I lead with confidence in every room I walk into. Do you see how much more visual that is? And you can actually place yourself in a room, walking into it, being confident. That's what you're looking for out of a positive affirmation. So again, we changed I want to be confident into I lead with confidence in every room I walk into. Now, I'm an examples person, so I went ahead and wrote out a bunch of examples that I think might be relevant to this audience. Hoping so, anyway. So, say you have the limiting belief of my voice doesn't matter. You can change that into I trust myself to speak with clarity and impact. One from my past, which is being visible is dangerous. I change that into I am grounded and safe in my visibility. Here's another one of people won't be drawn to the real me. You can change that to I show up as the most magnetic version of myself. Another one is I'm too much. You can change that to I am allowed to take up space fully and unapologetically. Ooh, another one that's big is I'm not good enough. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that. I know I definitely can. You can change that into I am in the process of becoming someone who deeply believes in her worth. Again, super specific and allows you to visualize. I am in the process of becoming someone who deeply believes in her worth. A couple more is if I'm seen, I'll be rejected. Turn that into I am safe to be seen, heard, and celebrated. And then my last example, it's not safe for me to be powerful. You can turn that into I embody my power with ease and grace. So again, this isn't rocket science. It's just understanding exactly what these affirmations need to be and then just giving it the visuals and the specificity that it needs to be effective. And the believability. Seriously, guys, believability is so key here because, again, if you are consciously sitting here and not believing something, I guarantee you your subconscious is not believing it either. So, again, that believability aspect just really has to be present with these. So, when you have your affirmations, then you can check it with these couple of questions that you can ask. Can you feel it in your body? Like, seriously, if you visualize it, do you actually feel that it's true? If so, then that's a wonderful affirmation. And the other big one is, would you remember it in a moment of doubt? Because again, we're trying to rewire our brain when we come across these triggers for us that incite these emotional responses that are keeping us held back in the first place. So this needs to be something that's accessible to you in a moment of doubt. Otherwise, you really can't use them effectively. And there's nothing wrong with writing this on a piece of paper too, if that's something that's going to help you. I definitely wouldn't judge you if you pulled out a piece of paper in an emotional moment. So then finally, I'm going to round this out with one of my real life examples using my own experience. So as if you've been listening to the podcast, from the very beginning, you know that I used to believe that being visible was really unsafe for me. And I didn't know I believed this until I started this Unveil You business, and my body just seemed to resist every time I tried to be seen. This has to do with on social media, launching this podcast, coming out with even artwork for the podcast, all sorts of different things. I just resisted. And then I thought back, well, I've always felt like this when it comes to like performing on stage or public speaking. Like, this is a theme of my life. There's actually something here anchoring me into this belief. So then I had to understand, where did this come from and why is this so challenging for me? And then I thought about my childhood and I realized that I just grew up in this gossip heavy culture and I saw people get torn apart verbally, and that really bothered me. So my nervous system decided for me a long time ago that to stay invisible is the same as staying safe. So it went ahead and wired that pathway in my brain of like, stay invisible and you're good. So that's why I was having so much resistance every time I was doing these things that made me visible. So, how did I go about disproving it? I looked at friends who were highly visible and thriving, especially during my college years, and I broke away from my hometown. I was able to see all sorts of different types of people, and especially now in my career. And there's people that just put whatever out there and they're so happy and they're doing really well with it. In fact, like it's core to their businesses in some cases and it helps them thrive. So that was something that disproved it to me. It's like, okay, yeah, visibility is not always a bad thing. I guess I'm seeing that in the real world. And then also, I looked inward at times where I was visible and praised for that. So, for example, this is something really stupid, but at work, normally I would never participate in like a food cook off or something like that. And my job was doing a chili cook off. And I actually thought, you know what? I do make a really good chili. I should enter it. I think a version of me like 2 years ago would have never done something like that. I would have never put something like my own creation up for, discussion against other people's, because I just that thought just terrified me. I didn't want the harsh criticism. Like, it's not like I was doing it to win, but like I definitely didn't want to lose either. So, yeah, I actually won this chili cook-off, and that was really crazy to me because again, it's so stupid, but like it's something I wouldn't have done a few years back. And yeah, so that's a as visible as it can get. It's like, here's my food and here's, who made it, and go ahead and critique it. So I mean, that was a more recent thing for me, but I mean, there's been lots of things throughout my life where, you go and do a performance for a dance recital or something and people say real all sorts of nice things. And I guess it's just up to you to believe it if people mean it or not. Like, people don't say stuff just to say it. Almost never do they say stuff just to say it. So, yeah, I was remembering times of visibility and getting praise for that. So then with disproving these limiting beliefs of visibility, I was then able to create some new affirmations. So the one that I use that sticks with me is, being seen reveals my strength, not my weakness. And then I practiced that until my nervous system could actually believe it. So now it's your turn. So just to look at all that we've talked about today on this podcast, I want you to reflect. What's one area in your life that you want to change? What do you believe about yourself in that area? And where did that belief come from? And most importantly, whose voice is it really? Once you have that reflection time and you figure that out, it's time to debunk it and become a loving detective for yourself. Look for the proof that challenges this belief that you hold. And then it's time to write your new affirmation. Write one that feels like a truth that you can start to believe and start to get your brain on board with so those neural pathways can start to rewire themselves. Write one that speaks to who you are already becoming. Again, that present tense. Don't put it in an aspirational way. Put it in a way that makes you feel like things are happening for you right now. So you say it and you feel it and you repeat it, especially in those times where you're triggered emotionally. If you do this work and you really do it, your outer world absolutely will begin to reflect your inner truth. I know this because I'm living it right now and I see others all the time doing the same. If you put in the work and believe in it, your life will start to change for the better. Like, guys, it's not a maybe. It seriously will change. So you might as well give this a try. Then finally, send me a DM on Instagram at unveilyou.co and share the affirmation you created. I'd absolutely love to witness it. Or even if you're stuck in neutral and can't figure out how to write an affirmation that works for you, send me a DM and I'd love to give you my take on things and help you get unstuck. I believe we're in this together and I'd love to help you in any way that you need. And if this episode shifted something in you, send it to a friend who's rewriting their story too. Thank you so much for listening in today, and I hope you have a beautiful week. Bye.